Counter 1. The shadow in the attic. When Mark and his wife, Sarah, moved into their dream home in a quiet New England town, they had no idea what awaited them in the attic. The house was old, with a history dating back to the late 1800s, and the locals often whispered about its haunted past. One night, as Mark was working late in his study, he heard footsteps creaking above him. Thinking Sarah had gone upstairs, he called out to her, but there was no response. Confused, he climbed the narrow attic stairs and swung open the door. The air was thick and musty, filled with the scent of old wood and decay. A single bulb flickered above, casting eerie shadows across the room. Then he saw it. A dark figure stood in the corner, its form shifting like smoke. It had no eyes, no discernible features, just a presence so overwhelming that it made his skin crawl. Mark felt a wave of nausea wash over him as an unbearable cold filled the room. Then, in a blink, the figure rushed toward him. He stumbled back, slamming the attic door shut and racing downstairs, his heart pounding like a drum. Sarah found him trembling in the kitchen. He tried to explain, but she laughed it off until she saw the attic door slowly creak open on its own. The next few nights were filled with unexplainable occurrences, objects moving, whispers in the walls, and the suffocating feeling of being watched. Then, one night, Sarah woke up screaming. She had felt a cold hand wrap around her ankle, pulling her toward the edge of the bed. Mark flipped on the lights, but the room was empty. Desperate for answers, they contacted a local historian who revealed the horrifying truth. Decades ago, the attic had been a prison of sorts for a mentally ill woman, locked away by her family until she died in isolation. Her presence had never left. Mark and Sarah left the house soon after, unable to endure the terror any longer. The house remains empty, but locals still claim to see shadows moving in the attic windows at night. Encounter 2. The crying woman by the lake. Lisa had always loved hiking alone, finding solace in nature's quiet embrace. But one fateful evening, as she trekked near a secluded lake in Oregon, she encountered something that would haunt her forever. As dusk settled, she heard it, the sound of a woman crying. The mournful wails echoed through the trees, sending chills down her spine. She hesitated, debating whether to investigate or turn back. Curiosity won. Following the sound, she reached the water's edge. There, under the pale moonlight, stood a woman dressed in a tattered white gown. Her long, dark hair covered her face as she sobbed into her hands. Lisa called out, asking if she needed help. The woman froze, then slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were hollow, black pits that bore into Lisa's soul. Her mouth opened unnaturally wide, emitting a guttural, unearthly scream that sent Lisa stumbling backward. The figure glided toward her, arms outstretched, fingers claw-like. Terrified, Lisa turned and ran, her breath ragged, heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't stop until she reached her car. As she fumbled with her keys, she caught one last glimpse of the woman's reflection in the window, standing right behind her. But when she turned around, there was nothing. Lisa later learned that the lake was infamous for her unexplained drownings. Legend had it that a woman had lost her child in the water decades ago and, in her grief, had taken her own life. Since then, her spirit roamed the lake, searching for her lost child and luring unsuspecting victims into the depths. Lisa never hiked alone again. Encounter 3. The whispering man David was a skeptic, never believing in ghosts or the supernatural. That changed when he took a job as a night security guard at an abandoned hospital. The building, once a bustling medical center, had shut down years ago due to numerous unexplained deaths. Stories of shadowy figures and eerie whispers had turned it into an urban legend, but David dismissed them as nonsense until his first night on duty. At around 3 a.m., as he made his rounds, he heard soft whispers coming from one of the empty hallways. He followed the sound, his flashlight trembling in his grip. The whispers grew louder, forming words he couldn't understand. Then, he saw him. A tall, gaunt figure stood at the end of the hall. Its face was obscured by darkness, but David could feel its piercing gaze. The figure raised a hand and beckoned him forward. David's body refused to move. Cold sweat dripped down his back. Then, the whispers turned into guttural, raspy breaths. and the figure began to advance toward him. Panicked, David bolted in the opposite direction, his footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. When he reached the security office, he locked the door and checked the monitors. The cameras showed nothing except for a single screen displaying static. The next morning, he quit. Years later, curiosity led him to research the hospital's past. What he found sent shivers down his spine. The figure he had seen matched the description of a doctor who had been accused of performing inhumane experiments on patients. When his crimes were exposed, he had taken his own life in that very hallway. David has never set foot in an abandoned building again. Some things are better left unexplored. Some spirits never leave. And sometimes the darkness is watching, waiting for its next victim.